We're told that Siddhartha Gautama Buddha was a sensitive fellow, and as he grew up in the palatial surroundings of his father's palace in ancient India, he realized that he wanted to see what was outside the castle walls, or the walls. So he went out there, and he said he had what we in the Buddhists for ages have called the four sights. He saw a sick person, an old person, a dead person, and then a monk wandering around who didn't seem to be troubled by any of it. But Buddha was troubled because he hadn't run into death, old age, or sickness before. Nor had he run into somebody who seemed to have the ability to move within this horrible reality of old age, sickness, and death, which is inevitable and which comes to everyone. He hadn't seen someone that seemed to be walking around in it and being completely content, even in the middle of that perceivably horrible situation. He wanted to emulate that fellow. So he did. He left, and back then they really had one way to get away and find the truth. They had a great esteem for holy men back then, for people who were on the spiritual path. So he abandoned ship and left his castle, left his wife, left his son. This is how much he didn't leave them stranded. I mean, they were princess and prince. So, I mean, it's not like they weren't taken care of, but he was willing to renounce everything he had and go to find the truth, which is a better service than staying home anyway. So he went out to find the truth, and the only way he knew was asceticism, or the denial of the body. This is still true in Hinduism. It's still true in India. I've been there. I've seen it with my eyes. People do torture their bodies. There's a stream of it in Christianity with self-flagellation and self-denial, as if somehow denying your body will make you spiritual, as if spiritual and body are two different things. So Buddha went out and was reduced himself with a bunch of friends. I guess they had a contest of who can starve the most, to the point that he was down to 1 grain of rice a day, the story goes, and was living on that, out in the elements, in what essentially was a diaper. Now that's rough. I mean, India has bad monsoons and horrible heat. Believe me when I tell you this, but Buddha lived through all that to try to reach the spiritual goal. He got emaciated, and he was almost dead, and some little girl came by with a skin of milk and offered it to him, and he said, "I've had it with this. I'm not getting any more spiritual by starving myself." So he drank the milk. Well, his friends hated him for it and thought that he had wandered off the path. But as he recovered, Buddha realized that he didn't find joy and happiness and the absence of suffering in the palace life, nor did he find it in the halfway starved to death life. He went to Benares and to Sarnath in India, where I've been. I've been to the deer park. He was not far from there. He sat down under a tree and said, "I'm not going to get up until I understand. I'm just not going to get up." Now, here's where a bunch of religion comes in. Demons coming up and trying to trick him, demonic vixens trying to seduce him. Well, I don't believe any of that at all. I do think that his mind was fighting against it, because we are so addicted to the idea that we are permanent or can attain permanency, and that we are independent individuals. We're so addicted to that delusion. We're so addicted to that delusion that our mind will fight it. Your mind might even be fighting me right now, because you don't want to hear that you're impermanent and that you don't have any independent existence. That is the most addictive thing, and it's the root of all evil. The root of all evil is delusion and the hatred and greed that come along with it. So Buddha sat under that tree, supposedly, they call it the Bodhi tree, and he said, "I'm not getting up until I understand." And evidently he did come to a point of understanding. And what he understood, suddenly or gradually, we're not sure, he didn't really say, the 4 noble truths, or the 4 truths that will make you noble. And what are those 4 truths? That everything is unsatisfactory, that everything is impermanent, everything is dukkha, everything is irritating, everything does not bring happiness. The reason it doesn't is because we have a thirst for things to be different. And we have a craving thirst for things to be different. So we're constantly fighting against life as it is, but we don't want to die either. And then when we decide, "Oh, well, I'd rather die," we suddenly have an aversion for life and an aversion for death all at the same time. That thirst is the problem. The third noble truth is there's a way out of that thirst. That thirst can be quenched. That thirst can be annihilated if we know the truth and extinguish that thirst. And the way to extinguish that thirst is to have your feet firmly following the eightfold path. The eightfold path are behaviors and conditions and causes that will not only get rid of the delusion of the self and the delusion of permanence, but will open up a way so that you become a participatory, positive part of compassionate, active causation. Thus, not only making your life more peaceful and happy, but spreading the kindness and spreading the word. Understanding who we are, getting rid of the delusion of sucking on the self, getting rid of the idea that we're impermanent. Look, it's not even sensible to think that we're permanent because we're surrounded by death. It's ridiculous to think that we're happy all the time because we're not happy all the time. It's ridiculous to think that we don't identify as I, when I is a delusion. People fear that because they feel like they're losing part of themselves if they understand that the I is a delusion. There's no such thing as the I. But Buddha understood it. And he really wondered whether anybody would believe him. But that was the origin of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And we'll be unpacking these as we go along. At the American Buddhist Church, it is our goal to make the teachings of the Buddha consistent with Western conditions, to make Buddhism consistent with Western expectations. Buddhism is highly adaptable. Why? Because the truth is highly adaptable. Culture is not adaptable. Those traditions and ideas that make up culture that surround Buddhism are not, they become inflexible. But the truths of Buddha are highly, highly flexible. And at the American Buddhist Church, I am committed to making it even more so.